Things don't start themselves. You're saying maybe.
Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Okay.
The universe began to.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to TLR Podcast. I'm Tim.
I'm Janae.
And our topic today is going to be...
What?
Oh, I thought you knew.
The
existence of God. Defending God.
So, I think my favorite... I can't even say my favorite argument. I think my favorite argument, honestly, is I'd probably say the moral argument for the existence of God. Like, I think that's my favorite one, but that I think is like the strongest. That's what I think. But I do think that hitting on the cosmological argument, hitting on the ontological argument, hitting on the teleological argument, those I think are also sufficient. So we can I actually don't really care for the ontological argument, so we can actually
I'm not familiar with
out.
Ontological.
It don't even matter. Good. No, I'm just kidding. It's not worth it. I don't think.
All right. Well, let's hit the big stuff. Let's go in order of what will be most valued. And so,
okay,
you'd say moral. I would actually say cosmological, but that's probably just because I haven't fleshed out moral. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into it. The words actually don't matter. For anybody wondering, you do not need the words. You need the concepts. So, yeah. All right. So, getting into which one first? Cosmos?
Yeah. You want to start there?
Yeah. Okay. So, cosmological argument, cosmos argument. So,
and this is to make this clear. We are talking about the Kalam specifically.
I have no idea what that word means.
Well, the Kalam cosmological argument, there's different types of cosmological arguments. We are talking about the Kalam specifically, just so everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about.
Dang. See, I just you know how I don't even want to do it. I just realized the pool was a lot bigger than the pool I got in. It was
using a jacuzzi.
Cool. Yeah. I was in a jacuzzi and didn't even know this is actually connected to a 10-foot pool on the other side. Okay.
10-foot.
Okay. Cosmological argument. So it's the idea that, well, at least how I've explained it is things don't make themselves. We've never seen that before. And so to make the universe the one exception to a rule that we've never seen broken leans in favor of something else needs to be there. Effects have causes. And so, yeah, because otherwise I don't know, I use that example a lot of if I just see a kid running down the street without his parents, I don't assume he doesn't have parents. They might not be there, they might be absent, they might just be at home. But I don't think kid without child equals he was not birthed, he always existed. We've never seen that before. And so when we get to the fact that it's the entire universe is made up of material that hasn't been here forever, we can actually confirm that through science and the Big Bang and things like that. It's everything gets down to a single point, and before that, it wasn't. But because it actually exists, that means something had to bang it. So that's the cosmological argument in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, I just think yes, that is accurate. I think we should state what the cosmological argument says, though.
I didn't know it had a creed.
That's a good word. I mean, well, that's what it is. What the cosmological argument actually is, I guess, this creed, which is whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Okay.
Premise 2.
All right.
The universe began to exist. Premise 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
Right.
That's important because the reason why I guess stating that those premises are important is because it's the detail of whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Yeah.
Because that's highlighting the law of cause and effect.
Right.
The word begins to exist is basically saying there was to begin, there is movement, there is a change, a shift.
Yeah.
Which that is the definition of an effect. So if this phone is just sitting on this table and it's not moving, there is no effect. But if while we're sitting here talking, the phone goes like this, there's no way that nothing caused it to do that.
Right.
Even if we can't figure it out.
Right.
Either the weight was unbalanced, the table, maybe it was already sitting on edge, but the table is kind of at a tilt that we can't tell, and so it caused the phone to slide a little bit. If there's a wind blowing that we just didn't realize.
Just blew straight through the middle of the table.
It just only through the middle. It's like whatever the reason is. I mean, if there's like somebody that is controlling my phone with a remote control somewhere, I mean, whatever it is, an effect is a change in something.
Yeah.
So, and that can't happen without a cause. Right. So the fact that the cosmological argument is saying whatever begins to exist has a cause, not whatever is has a cause. If it just is sitting here, that doesn't mean. But the thing about this phone, which is funny, is that if you keep tracing this back, if we had to rewind the tape, you're gonna see me go like this.
Right.
I put it there.
Right.
It wasn't there, then it was, which means this phone has not always been sitting here.
Right.
And if you keep tracing back all the materials in the phone, you're going to find it in some factory somewhere, however iPhones are made. Right. And then those ingredients, or whatever you call them, what do you call them? They're not ingredients, that's food.
What, pieces?
Just parts. Yeah, pieces and parts. It's like those came from somewhere that had an effect. And then on the bigger scheme, the earth, the universe, it's like the materials. That's what I'm looking for.
Like no matter what you point at, you'll ultimately get back to the same beginning.
To an effect. Exactly.
And the whatever begins to have a cause is. So, okay, I want to ask this before I ask the next question. Is the cosmological argument a faith-based argument, or is this a scientific statement that's been here forever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that it's a scientific statement because it's a law within nature.
Okay.
Like the law of cause and effect is not a Christian concept.
That's not a Christian concept.
Yeah, anybody would agree that anything that is an effect had a cause.
Okay. I only ask that because of how perfectly it defends what comes next, which is what caused God. Right?
Right.
And so the idea is whatever begins to exist has an effect. If something had no beginning, then it in and of itself doesn't need an effect.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because God is not an effect.
Right.
At least, and it's funny because it's almost like it's two parts or two things to address, because God, whether or not a person believes in God, if they just go with the equation.
Right.
If a God or a entity, a being, whatever you want to call it, if this entity does exist, and if hypothetically this entity did not have a cause,
right,
it by definition it is an eternal being,
right,
no beginning, no end.
Yeah.
Then a synonym to that understanding is that it never had an effect.
Yes.
It wasn't an effect, because an effect is a change in something, a change in state, I guess. So it's like if this entity was always here, it never came into existence. It never began. It never started. It never wasn't, then it was. There was never a change or an effect, which means, according at least to the Kalam cosmological argument and the law of cause and effect, that entity, it doesn't need a cause. That's like the wrong language. That's like saying, what does your hair sound like?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, that doesn't make sense.
Okay. No, that's fair. And everything just pushes the question back. So if you want to say, well, it's like, no, there's the multiverse theory. And it's like, well, that's cool. Maybe there is a multiverse that is finite also and needs a ultimate cause. It's like no matter how far back you go, you end up having to deal with either infinite regression, which is its own problem, or an uncaused cause.
Exactly.
Like at some point, one of those two things has to be addressed. I think the reason I like this argument the most is because it it's funny when I make this argument, people always like get upset and say like, and that gets you to your God or something like that. Like it's like because they can feel where it's leaning
Yeah.
well before I'm making that case. And it's
Right.
like, wait a minute, whatever made matter can't be made a material. That almost sounds like it's invisible. If matter has a starting point, then so does space and time, which means whoever made space isn't limited to space. It sounds like omnipresent. Like, and then it's like, oh, dang. And then whatever started with time must not be bound by time. He must be timeless. And it's like, nah, I'm not a Christian. And it's just like, I didn't say anything about Jesus. Like, but it's like, for real, I'm like, dang, like you can feel the tension of, I'm really not trying to press you. Like, this is just, like, I'm actually trying to stay neutral right now. And you know what I believe, ultimately.
Right.
And so, what's it called? I feel like it gets overused. And what's funny is, usually analogies that are overused are very deeply true. But then they get abused so much that you feel like you don't want to use them. Because I've always heard the like author analogy, or God as the author. I mean, it's even in the Bible.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
the author of our faith. And I'm like, man, but that actually covers so much ground. Like when I think about what God is to us, if we are characters in a book, it's like, and somebody, we've already done this before, but it's just like, what does the author have to be made up of? It's like if I made a drawing and it's paper and ink and color and paint, it's like, what type of being had to make us? Like, and it's just like, well, yeah, maybe he's made of ink. It's like, no, he made us. He can't be made of what he made us out
Right.
of. That doesn't work. We can't make each other. We can like, and so it's like, all right, well, is he limited by time? Like if you're reading halfway through the story and they're actually thinking about it, it's like, well, no. If he wrote us, then he literally wrote the ending. We're just talking about it in chapter 6.
Right.
Like, but how many chapters are there? God knows. Like, it's like that the author knows. It's like there's so much about it, and then it's just like, oh well, I mean, when did he do it? And it's like, what authority does a book have on asking when it was written?
Yeah.
Like, it can only judge time. Like, Harry Potter can only judge time by, what is that, 7 books? So his 7 years at Hogwarts. Like, he doesn't get to say 2001. Like, that year doesn't register.
They could have wrote the book, like, they could have wrote the book and then just never
address the time.
Yeah.
Or set the time period in the 80s.
Right.
He's just wrong. Like, it doesn't matter. Right. And so it's just like, that's why it's like, oh, he's separate from time. He's separate from space. Like, the author is actually, it's just like, it's funny, but I'm like, it feels, whenever I use it, it feels like an overworked analogy that I end up still having to press because it actually does make sense to me. Like, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons it's my favorite, is because it gets a lot of work done. Yeah. Without working. Like, it's just being honest. It's just being scientific. And it's like, okay, so whatever caused this universe has to have at least 3 of these properties. We haven't talked about him being good or moral, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
because those loving would be like characteristics. Like, I think what I am in love with are the attributes of God. Yeah. Like, because I feel like it's more on the emotional side of me, where I'm just like, man, God being a good God, a healer, a loving God. Like, this is morality, his character. Yeah. But it's like, those are 2 completely separate things. Like, a human being is made up of blood, dirt, water. Right. Everything else we're made up of oxygen. I don't know the human makeup, but you get what I mean. Like, what we are is different than who we are. Yes. You know, and so I think, me personally, what grounds me in God's existence is not because I'm like, man, God's just so good. I'm like, that's helpful. Right. But when I think of the attributes of God, like what he would have to be as a cause, real. Like, that blows my mind, and that's what roots me in my faith. Yeah. You know? Okay. Yeah, I think I do want to bring this up because I think like it's a good contribution to the yeah. Yeah, I guess I could bring this up. I think it is a good contribution. I need to bring it up actually with while we're on the cosmological argument. And so I really love Josh Rasmussen and his work.
Okay.
You know, and so I think right alongside with the cosmological argument, I think it's almost like a form of it, or like a supporting argument, I guess. But it's like the concept of basically he paints this picture of like a blob and says like if everything that exists, anything you can think of, whether we know about it or not, just everything that is in reality.
Right.
If it exists, we're going to call that a blob.
Right.
Which means if we believe God exists, God is in this blob.
Yeah.
There is nothing that's not in this blob that does not exist.
Right.
So he paints this picture of like saying this blob represents all that exists. If that is the case, then there is nothing outside of this blob that explains the blob.
Right.
Because the blob is encompassing all that exists, all that is, which means the blob is self-sufficient.
Right.
Which means there is a self-sufficient aspect within all that exists. There's something about it. It makes me think about like an airplane being up in the sky. If someone didn't know what an airplane was, this is a really good analogy. It's just stuff be coming. Okay. An airplane flying in the sky. If someone didn't know anything about humanity, planes, Earth, it's a Martian from another galaxy,
right.
And they come and they see the thing flying and they're just like, what's making it do that?
Yeah.
They might throw a human off board and be like, it's still going.
All right.
It wasn't that person. Maybe it was the next person. Maybe it was that cell phone thing sitting there. They don't know. They're throwing the popcorn, the drinks, the sodas, the flight attendant. I mean, they're just figuring out what is making it still flying. None of these things are causing it to fly. And then, let's say they throw the pilot out. Co-pilot takes over. Oh, well, it wasn't specifically him doing it. And then let's say they throw the co-pilot out. They throw all the humans out. And the thing is still flying. Because I actually was told recently that a plane will continue to fly. Like, even if it ran out of gas, it can still cruise for another, like, hour and a half.
Okay, I was about to say, now we got
fact
questions.
Check me, I don't know, but somebody just told me this recently. So I was like, interesting. Okay. Point being, the plane is still gliding in the air. It's still going. Okay. If they take, let's say, the wings off, they snap them both in half. I don't know what happens to the plane. It doesn't have wings. It probably just goes straight down.
I do. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking without the wings, it probably goes straight down. My point is, because even the engine plays a role. I don't know the details of the plane, but for people who are listening, if you know, and just seeing where I'm going with this, it's like whatever is making the plane actually go is the thing that's making it go, even though there's all these components that seem present. And relating that back over to the blob, when you look at this blob of just reality of all that exists, you can start looking at everything that is finite versus self-sufficient. The fact that the blob exists already is showing that there's a self-sufficient, this is equivalent to saying there's something that's making this plane fly. Where is it?
Yeah.
You know, so throwing the phone and the drinks and the people off the plane is an example of tracing everything back in reality. Like, what is making reality just be independently versus the things that are dependent? Like, there's an independent aspect to reality, and then there's a dependent aspect to reality. Yeah. Because we can trace this stuff back, like the Big Bang, for example. You know, it's like tracing the universe back to the fact that it had a cause. And the universe being what we would say all that exists. It's like all these things came from something. We can keep tracing this stuff back all the way to where matter, space, and time were not a thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, but yet something is still self-sufficient. It has to be.
Yeah.
Where is that thing? And even if you don't have an answer to that, the reality is that based off of the way Rasmussen like laid that out, I just really like it because it's like there is a self-sufficient factor within our reality. There is an independent thing
Yeah.
versus dependent things.
Yeah.
And there has to be a separation.
Yeah.
We can't say dependent things only exist.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Right.
Everything can't be dependent.
Yeah. No,
You know?
that makes sense. I think even to strengthen the analogy of the plane, because I feel like someone could pick that and say, basically, the plane only flies because of a bunch of interdependent things that can't work without the other. It's like pilot without an engine doesn't fly. Engine without a pilot doesn't get up there. Autopilot matters only if a pilot sets the course. And so you get this idea of the universe exists because it's interdependent. Like, and it's like, it's more like, I feel like your analogy is just stronger with the phone. It's like, there's a bunch of things that, why'd you make that face?
Because I was trying to find it before you said it. I was like,
yeah, it's like
not clicking.
there's a bunch of stuff that's really smart about a phone. And it's like you could take little things out and stuff might short circuit, but stuff would still work or stuff would. But it's like if you take the battery out, you are done. Like this thing provides. Like
exactly.
If you do the Martian thing where you're throwing stuff out, it's like that's all well and good until you get to the battery. It's like there's things, and not only that, but you can take the battery out and put it in other things, and it would actually. It's like power.
Exactly.
Some sort of source that, yeah. So,
yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Yeah. That's the exact concept where it's like whatever's actually making this thing run.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what you keep on adding on and stacking on. Like, even if that's why even you bringing up the whole like multiverse or whatever, it's like, yeah, like that would still be considered within the blob.
Yeah.
But everything can't be dependent though.
Yeah.
It's like you can't have, well, this caused this, and then this caused this. Well, this caused that, which caused that, which caused that, which caused that. That cycle in itself can't then equal, and he just makes a really good argument. It's like, when you think about that, a group of dependent things cannot equal a self-sufficient blob.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like, it doesn't, even if you say all the nature of everything in reality is dependent.
Right.
Everything is dependent on something. Everything continues to have a cause. Even if you say, well, the whole infinite regress is the eternal thing, but everything's dependent. So this whole dependent, it's like, that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing in itself would need to be explained. Like, a whole bunch of dependents don't equal an independent, self-sufficient thing.
Yeah.
Like, it don't matter.
Yeah.
That actually makes no logical sense.
Yeah.
Which adds to the cosmological argument.
Yeah. It just goes back to, like, you would need an example of something you've ever seen. Because that's what normally happens is, I can't say normally. In my experience, that is what has happened, is you end up with the argument of, maybe you're right, and maybe it's something else. And it's like, right, but who's taking the leap now? Like, between, it's like, I'm saying things don't start themselves. You're saying maybe they do. And it's just like, you're right. Maybe they do. Maybe somewhere deep in the cosmos, in the corner of the backyard of the universe, stuff is just out there starting itself. But we've never seen that before, which is exactly the argument that's usually made against Jesus' resurrection. We don't see that. People don't just die and get up.
Right.
And so it's like you end up in a position of basically scrapping for a philosophy that you can't back in nature, while one is sitting right here, which is, well, maybe something did it. Like everything else has been done. And so, yeah, I think that, anyway,
that's a good point. I think that's always just interesting to me. Like, I still don't understand that. And I'll be hearing people debate about that all the time and making that exact argument, like a Delahanty. And he'll be like, the universe in itself or the universe itself is a rare event. You know, it's something so, it is a miracle, you know, but it's like, that's only a one-time occurrence though. Like they use that argument. It's like the universe is a one-time occurrence that we only have one example of, you know, and it's like, so to be like, you know, we have all these examples within the universe. It's like they'll say, you know, use that as like
that's the exception and everything else.
But to me, I'm like, we only have this to go off of.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's almost like, I don't want to say evolution. Like, I don't want to just use that word loosely, but it's just one of those things when I think about, like, if we're trying to trace everything backwards, it would make sense that, like, common and familiar concepts would keep getting passed down.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, if gravity existed, like, whatever started at the beginning, you know, when the universe first started expanding, it's like, okay, what was present there? It's like everything had to be.
Yeah.
The water that we're drinking today. It's like all the periodic table, all the elements, all that stuff had to be there when the universe began, because we're still using stuff today.
Right.
So it's like the concept of gravity, the concept of different, you know, it's like all that stuff had to be present. And then, you know, and so to me, it's like, well, or at least the potential for it. Even if something wasn't there because something had to mix and fuse with something else.
That just means that wasn't the element. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, sure, zinc, if that's an element. It's like, if zinc wasn't there, it's because protons and neutrons
didn't do. No.
Too far, Bill.
No, that's not even too far. I'm thinking like, even with me and you, because I say this all the time, like, and it blows my mind, because I'll be like, me, you, and everybody watching this video or listening to this, it's like we were all here. We all existed since the beginning of time. You know what I mean?
In the physics, like all of our material, whatever we're made out of,
has always been present. Because I come from my mom and dad, who come from their mom and dad, who come from their mom and dad, who gets all the way back to the very first human beings who were made from the dirt, which is made from the earth, which came from the universe, which came from the beginning. We have been here. Yeah. It's just our actual form we've taken place has not been here. No different than, and this used to blow my mind all the time, because I'd be like, that means this iPhone, everything, all the elements needed to make this iPhone was here when Adam and Eve was walking the earth.
Right.
They could have created an iPhone.
Right.
Everything if we have to break down all the elements of what this is, they could have made it.
Nothing
if
new.
There was no new, I don't even, you know, when you don't have the education, because I'm like, I wish I could be like, you know, when you look at the glass silicone screen and the buttons, I mean, that's all I could say. It's like, but whatever it's made out of, like inside the phone, all the actual elements, the people that build the iPhone, whatever, it's like, it was all present.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, we talked about this the other day, probably like a few weeks ago, and I was like, you know what would suck? If I or we went back to 10,000 BC, I would not know. I would know electricity exists. I could make a house. I could have a pool in the backyard in 10,000 BC. I don't know how to make no jacuzzi.
Right.
I don't know how to make a microwave. I don't even know how to make a fire in nature.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to make a phone. But you would look around and be like, everything's here. I just don't know how to do it. But it does exist, even if it hasn't been composed in that form.
Yeah.
But the argument is that it's present.
Yes.
So, anyways, I feel like it was overkill, but it makes the point. And I forget what I was connecting that to.
Me too. But they didn't forget, and they have a rewind button, so they're fine.
Dang, no, I was connecting it. If it was always here and existing, we were connecting that to something with God's existence, or just the argument.
Yeah, just the fact that everything that ever has been dependent has always been here up until a certain point. Mm-hmm. And before that point,
it was the universe being its own exception.
Right.
And tracing stuff back.
Yeah.
Okay, that concept. That concept, because to me it's like, because you were making the argument like, you've never seen something that was here without a cause.
Right.
And it's like, well, then why, you said it would be a further leap
Yes.
for someone to then say, well, the universe doesn't need a cause just because everything that we've seen has a cause.
Yeah.
But the universe is its own one-time miracle occurrence, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would you not trace back all of the familiar things? Like, it's a high probability.
Why would you be unscientific? Because the thing is,
exactly.
And this is how math works. Because it's one of those things to say, okay, and I wonder what someone would say to this. I've never even asked that before. But it's like, okay, it's not unreasonable to think an effect has a cause. But then it's like, but it's also possible that multiple other things could have caused the universe. And it's like, I can grant that because you can get the multiverse, you can back it up as far as you want. But it's like to ask, what are the chances, just the chances, that ultimately there is no cause behind everything that exists? Like, what is the percentage? You know what I mean? Because it's just like, yeah, I don't even know how to like properly describe that. Like, to me, that sounds the exact same as saying, what are the chances that you, Janae, if I just met you for the first time, don't have a mother and father? What are the chances? It's like, I don't even know how to answer the question.
But they feel like, people who argue against that feel like we have countless examples. Like, almost like, they think it's almost like comparing apples to oranges.
Me too, right now. I'm curious where you're going.
Yeah, but I mean, I kind of said it already, but it's like, they think it's comparing apples to oranges. They think if you say, there's so many examples, you know, or like you said, if somebody came up to you and said, you know, do you think this person has a cause? Mm-hmm. Like, did someone cause them? Were they born? Like, did they have a cause? It's like, is that a hard question? It's like, it shouldn't be, because look at all these countless examples of human. You're asking, does human have a cause?
Yeah.
Look at all these humans that have causes.
Right.
So why would you then conclude or even be confused or hesitate to figure out if this human being has a cause?
Yeah.
But the argument goes, we don't have a whole bunch of other universes to compare to. We have this one-time occurrence. So how do we know that it alone isn't just maybe self-sufficient, which is where Josh Rasmussen's example, I think, annihilates that concept. Yeah. Because I'm like, you could just say the universe, and it's like, it doesn't make actual sense when you, it sounds cute to me, but it's like, it doesn't make actual sense when you lay it out.
Right.
Like, I feel like I have not yet heard an argument that I've been like, fair.
Right.
When it comes to this, especially understanding the independent versus the dependent aspects of this self-sufficient existence that just is.
Yeah.
Like, I can't fathom that, because it is self-sufficient.
Okay. So, because there's one connection that I think I'm weak in, and it's still in the cosmological realm, so I feel like I gotta ask it. I remember you explained this to me once, and I just lost it, but the universe does exist, and that proves that that whatever is behind the causing of the universe is a mind. Like, not just the attributes of God, but the fact that we exist. It's like, because things don't start themselves, and if God always was, then why change the status of going from being to creating, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it would be a blend of love, but then also, I see what you're saying. Love would almost be like the motive and the intention, but the ability would be rooted in the fact that this God or this entity can actually make a decision.
Decide. Yeah.
Which
like
means it's a thinking being, or else it would have always remained in its state.
That's the answer. Okay. It's the difference between, no, okay. That's exactly what I was talking about. It's, if I set a phone here and it moves on its own, like, either something moved it or I'm leaving. Because,
It's possessed.
yeah. But it's like, but if a friend sat down in that chair for 10 minutes and then decided to get up, that's not strange. It's proof of a mind capable of making decisions.
Exactly. There's mind and matter.
Yeah. All right, cool. On to the moral.
Wait.
Oh, okay. My bad. All right, where we at?
Let's go back to the premises. So it's like, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Let me ask you this. Do you think there's any reason, or that if you had to play devil's advocate at the best you can, do you think that can be debunked? Like, someone can say, I think your premise is false. And I'm thinking too.
Right. So, can I think of any time that an effect or just something that exists, because maybe I shouldn't say effect. If I loosen it, maybe I could make an argument. Okay. What if somebody had said, because everything that exists is physical, then that just means that in order to exist, it has, like, to define, if we define existence as things that exist or things that are in time, space, and matter, or then for God to be outside of that is essentially to not exist.
Okay.
That was the best I could do with the question, is not answer it. So I'm sorry, because that is not what you asked me. But that's the only way I can make an argument.
Where I thought you were going, which I guess you get to kind of go there, bringing Delahunty back up. Like, I think he was in a conversation. I don't know if it was Jordan Peterson or who was he talking to, but he was basically saying, and I was like, I get where he's going, but I'm like, because they were talking about consciousness, and he was saying, we don't have any examples of consciousness, like of knowing what consciousness is, or where we can demonstrate consciousness apart from matter, like even the mind apart from the brain. And it's like, oh, well, you kind of say the typical little, like, human beings have this energy and this thinkingness about them, and it's like, but when they die, it's their body lays motionless. And it's like, yeah, but what if it was the brain and the wiring that actually causes them to be alive? Like, we don't know if there's this, the way we see it, like the death and the soul leaves the body, the mind. It's like he said, we don't see that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of where I honestly thought you were going. Is that what you were basically saying, is like consciousness being separate from matter?
Yeah. Yes, in the sense of like, okay. I thought two things. One is I was going to pause you when you brought up consciousness, because I feel like most people are like I feel like people could roll their eyes and listen to this podcast. And as a person who used to roll their eyes, I would say hit pause, try to define this, and then hit play again. Because this is stuff that, yeah, people that matter know. These are tough questions. But, okay. But anyway, consciousness itself. Dang. You were saying, yeah, I would agree that I was basically implying that if it's not physical, then we can't confirm that it exists. And so we can confirm the brain, we can confirm eyes, we can confirm electricity that goes through your brain and all of that stuff. It's like all of that stuff can be confirmed, but consciousness seems like a concept that may or may not exist. And so to say, basically, if God does not fall into the things that we were talking about, like the brain and stuff like that, then it's like, well, cool. If you're going, it's one of those things where it's like someone could argue, if you're going to remove your God so far from observable science, then we'll just say, cool. Like, yeah, it reminds, I think the argument reminds me of a person. It's like, I don't know, playing a sport and they don't want to get the ball stolen, and so they run. And then it's like, well, you can't run forever. And then they run out of bounds. And then it's like, and then they run out of the house. And it's like, okay, well, if you're just like,
gonna take the ball.
yeah, if you're just going to take the ball and roof it, then it's like, okay, you lose. Because you've taken it so
Right.
far out of play that it's like, okay, well, I can't argue if you're willing to stand there and say, infinity shield, you can't touch me. Like that kid. And so I feel like that could be the argument maybe is, yeah, Christians are going to make God so infinite in every category that he is just no fun. So y'all can play in the corner if you want.
Right.
That's the best argument I can make. I think the issue is that you have to deal with the fact that, like, who put the line here? Like if we're going to say it's out of bounds, it's like, it just feels like one of those things that's like, okay, we understand this to be material, but we already know, like, I guess my answer to the question would be different. It would be to go a dimension down and then realize, like, yes, as flesh beings, we say everything is made of flesh. But it's like, I just had this conversation with somebody and they were like, you know, like, processors make video games. And so it's like, even if you make a video game, the processor's still made out of material. And I'm like, right, but that's not actually a one-to-one comparison. Like, video games are made out of code. And so if the video game people thought everything that it is code, so processors must not exist because processors aren't made out of code. Like,
Right.
and it's just like we have to go a dimension down to make the argument up. It's like we're not on the same plane as God. God would be the processor, we would be the code. And so
Yeah.
we're the
That's a good
flesh,
example.
God is spirit. That's a different type of entity. So yeah, I just feel like that's what's happening. We would just have to make the comparison well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long explanation.
I mean, but I feel like fleshing it out like that. I like the processor, and the code, because I know, like, a lot of times, like, comparing life DNA with code is a thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's... Go ahead. That's just true. I'd be excited, man.
Oh my god, it'd be hilarious. I swear, I say it every time. You need to be on a sitcom.
We're on a podcast now, so we're halfway there.
But yeah, because I mean, my thought, I guess, is like just kind of playing off of that. It's like, and I hope this isn't getting too deep. It's like deep simple. It's simple deep.
I'm gonna let you start. I hope you didn't think I had something to say to that.
I was waiting for confirmation that you understood what I was trying to say. But I'm thinking, like, when I think of consciousness versus wiring, I don't even know if I'm going to explain this clearly, but it seems like two different things. Like, when I think of the brain having bad wiring, in a sense, I say wiring in the sense of, like, someone who, you know, is, I don't know, schizophrenic, or somebody that lost their mind, you know, and it's like and they'll be able to tell too, like, dang, this is pushing against the brain, this thing is pushing against this in the brain, which is causing the person to, like, hallucinate, or it's causing, and it's like, what in the world, you know? But it's like, to me, that's still the senses, that's still dealing with matter, it's still dealing with the wiring, which is causing whatever the energy is sitting inside of you. Like, it's still your eye sockets that's seeing the hallucination. It's still how you're perceiving matter.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like people have used that argument, and I hope I'm, I guess, like, doing it justice in the sense of how I'm even trying to break it down. But it's like, because either I'm completely missing something or this makes sense. It's one or the other. Because I'm just thinking, like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not thinking of the wiring in the brain and how we know, like, oh, dopamine and, this causes this and these connections cause this. And if this is off, it can actually cause somebody to see things like this, or to no longer have a certain type of level of awareness, or they actually lose their mind. And to me, I'm like, but they're still alive.
Right.
The fact that they're a conscious being, that is something different to me than wiring.
Yeah.
That needs to be explained.
Nah, that makes sense. It's the reason why whenever you get in your whole post-apocalyptic worlds where you find a Walmart and you're just like, dang, where's the power? Because everything in here actually still, nothing's broken.
Yeah.
Nothing actually everything is fully intact. Mm-hmm. Or you find a car, but it won't start. And the only thing you're thinking is, in this post-apocalyptic world,
mm-hmm.
power. That's the only thing that's missing.
Right.
And it's like, so if you put a battery in a car and start it, it'll start.
Mm-hmm.
It should start. It's like, go to Walmart, you find the power switch, fix the breaker. It's like, and that's basically what you're saying, is it's not that once power's in our body that you still can't mess something up. Like, you can have power running through a telephone, but then cut one of the lines,
mm-hmm.
and now you're not getting a good signal. You can't hear, or
right.
But it's like, and so it's like, yeah. So basically, that's what you're saying, is it's like, when the brain presses up, it causes people to hallucinate. It's like, right, but what we don't understand is how, when you take the batteries out of a person, you can't put whatever those kind of batteries are back in them.
Yeah.
Like, that actually goes somewhere else. It belongs to someone else. It's like in that
mm-hmm.
that life. That's what we're calling life, that energy. It's like,
yeah, like, what is that?
Yeah.
Because it's not, like, if somebody was to have a very bad accident to the head, it's like, okay, let's say if it was, a big enough impact where they died.
Yeah.
It's like, somebody can also get shot, and it doesn't matter where, but let's just say it was in a place that was detrimental to where they died.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, they could have got shot in their leg, it could have been the stomach. It's like, but what actually happens? I don't even know, like, the details, but it's like loss of blood
Mm-hmm.
and oxygen, I guess, and blood, like, to the heart, to the brain. Like, when people have a stroke, it's like all these different things that I'm sure people who actually know the medical
Mm-hmm.
like background, have a medical background, like, they can put words to this. But it's, as far as my understanding, I'm like, none of those things, not even none of those things, all of those things can cause a person to flatline and die.
Mm-hmm.
But no wound can also a person can still die. It's like a person can die in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what I don't understand is when I see a body laying there and everything's intact, it's like, well, then where did their energy go? Well, that thing, that their consciousness, where did that go? Because even somebody on a what's it called? Like, if they're in a coma, and they're connected to a machine, and they say, oh, the machine, let's say, is breathing for them, but they're brain dead. It's like, or even if the machine's not breathing for them, if somebody's just brain dead,
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, but they're still alive. There's an energy that's still keeping them alive. It's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, I don't really understand that. How can somebody be, because if the brain is what leads to consciousness, if someone's brain dead, then they should be dead.
Right.
But I doubt even a Delahanty would sit there and be like, well, throw them in the ground at this point. Like, you don't even need to kill them. The brain has disconnected. Yeah. It's like, there's an energy. You would say they're not conscious.
Yeah.
But they're alive. They're breathing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, is that just the body's reaction? Is that like all that to say, when I look at it, I'm like, there's something about consciousness that, an awareness, or this energy inside of our body that makes us living versus dead, that I think needs an explanation. And that thing does not seem like it is bound by matter.
Yeah. Yeah, nah. I mean, I think it makes sense to call it a mystery. What doesn't make sense is to disqualify its capabilities. You know what I mean? It's like everyone, I don't know people who are willing to say consciousness isn't a thing. You know what I mean? But I know people who are willing to say, but consciousness cannot be tied to. It's like when you start making claims of what it can't be. Like it's like, so we know we don't understand it, but you're going to tell me what it isn't. Like those are the claims that start to become like unscientific. It feels like it's like, oh yeah, we don't know what it is. We just know what it can't be. Like that just sounds like motive. Like I don't know another way to say it. It just sounds like it's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, it's like finding Noah's Ark. And then to just say like, well, I know what boat this isn't. Like, it's like,
Right.
why did you, even if it's not Noah's Ark, it's just you found a humongous boat that ain't got no business being here.
Right.
And but it's here. And it's like, yeah, and I'm not making a case for Noah's Ark. But, but I'm just saying, I'm like, to find the boat and say, yeah, this isn't Noah's Ark.
Yeah, this ain't it.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, why? Why'd you say that? It's like that only tells me where your disposition is, not your position. And so, yeah, I feel like that with conscience. It's like, we know it's there, but we also know what it isn't connected to, because I don't want to deal with it. That's what it kind of feels like.
Okay, I just had a thought. Tell me what you think about this. So, I just thought about reproduction. This seems like this is going to be a good argument, but I don't know yet. So we're going to see. But I'm just thinking like, okay, everything that gets transferred over from when people have a baby, it's all of the genes and DNA and all of that gets transferred through the mother and the father and even previous people. It's just getting transferred. It's like, oh, you got your grandma's eyes, you got your grandma's nose, you got your uncle's this, whatever. It's like, okay, similar ancestry coming down, and then boom, here comes you. The thing that I don't understand is that there's something else getting transferred. Personality. Like, the person is a thing. The fact that they are conscious and personality. That's weird that doesn't get transferred. Or it gets transferred, but it doesn't get transferred. What is getting transferred that this thing, if anything, if two people had a baby that came together and then they have a baby and then a baby falls out of them, not a living entity that has its own energy, consciousness inside of the baby, and the fact that the baby is its own person.
I don't follow. I don't know which direction you're leaning, because I feel like I could make a case for both them being an independent baby or a baby that is only the culmination of the two things. Even personality-wise, like you see it in my dad and my mom. Like when
What do you
you've
mean?
met them, so you know where I get my character qualities from.
No, but that's my exact point, because you could have been raised somewhere completely different. You would have all the qualities of your parents as far as what you are, but you would not act like them if you were raised somewhere in Australia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You would be a completely different person, which means something was not passed down that was from them. You get what I'm saying?
Sort of. Well, part of it is because I don't know where training ends and genetics begin. Because if you have two brilliant parents and then you grow up somewhere not brilliant, like you're probably still going to be top of your class somewhere. You just won't know why.
But that is something that is still talking about matter. Like that might be, and I don't have the vocabulary, but it could be like, oh,
yeah, brain paths or something.
yeah, like it's
open.
strengthened in that area. Like it goes back to the wiring. It's like, it makes me think like if a burger came out of In-N-Out, based off In-N-Out's system, they can pump a burger out and then take that burger somewhere else. Like the burger's going to be of good quality.
Right.
But that has absolutely nothing to do with individual personality. On when someone takes a bite of that burger, one person says, this tastes good. The other person says, I don't like it.
Right.
You know, or someone's personality and how they act. you know?
Okay.
So basically, it's like, to me, this seems like a good argument for consciousness because it's like, for one, when we think about how DNA works and how, let me not get into DNA, that matters, but it's more so, just like it's a tangent, it's more so like everything that comes out with that child, matter-wise, physically, is everything from the adults. I mean, from the adults, from the parents.
Right.
But when I think of the child's personality, that is something independent. But a person's mind, their character, all those invisible things that we talk about, all of that is not transferred, if that makes sense. Like the things that are unseen don't seem to transfer from the previous set. It seems almost as if it's a new thing being inserted in. Like you have your own, you are your own thing when it comes to your own mind. Like a person has their own mind, like their mind doesn't get transferred. All the physical things about them get transferred or passed down from their parents, but the mind doesn't get transferred.
See, I don't know.
Does that
Like,
make sense?
I don't know that I totally agree. Like, I just like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know if that's one of those like Aslan statements when he refers to them as like daughter of Eve, son of Adam. And it's just like, because to a certain extent, I do actually feel like, yeah, unless you mean like information, like I was not born with the raw data of things my dad has learned when I was born. Like I had to be taught those things. Like there's not a brain exchange. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but no. Even just your personality. It's like your personality, you're impressionable. Like you can't control the way this color of your skin. You can't control the way your fingers are shaped. You
Right.
can't control the way your nose, what it looks like, your lips. Like you had to just enter into the world looking how you look. But when it comes to your mind, that is starting from scratch. Your mind starts from scratch, which is why whether you were born here or if we took you to a whole other country with different customs and a different culture, or even just the next household over, being raised by different people, you train your matter.
Right.
And your matter is being, I guess, just
Taught how to
it's
respond to
being
its
taught.
environment, basically.
Yeah, but you're making it do that. But it is a fresh start. You don't get a fresh start with nothing else on your body.
I see.
You know?
Okay. No, that's fair. And I feel like that's, I don't know. It reminds me of I almost feel like any villain in a TV show that like has their clone, like they clone themselves in order to survive in the next generation, and so the clone is born and he has to be taught, but this one actually literally carries 100% of his potential. Like it's a clone, not a child, and so but the child has to be re-taught everything or retrained and it's like this is how humanity survives. This is how humanity attempts immortality, basically. It's like no matter how hard, it's like one generation survives life, they trudge, they get through, and they're wounded and they have scars and they have pain, but they do have lessons. And then they have a child, because you can't forget things. And so it's like, I did all of this, but I don't trust that village over there. They hurt me, but I know there's good people in it. I just know we have to defend ourselves. So I made this whole village. Then I had a child. And then I taught this child like everything I know. But this child is not wounded. He's not scarred. He's not scared. So he actually does have the potential to make peace with that village.
Yeah.
Like because he's new.
Right.
but he still has all the potential and the information you wish you didn't have, along with the information that you know he needs. And I just feel like that is, I don't know where this is going, but that is about where I feel like you've been taking it. So
Yeah, and I mean, I only even go into it like that because of the fact that, to me, you know, I never thought of this before. Like, I'm gonna actually flesh this out. This was actually like an on-the-fly thought because I want to actually like test it, you know, like bringing it up to other people, because I'm just like that. It just makes sense to me. Like, that's the only thing that is not actually passed down, and the reason why that even matters based off of where we were at before this is like, if a person is saying like consciousness is not separate from the brain, like what Delahanty will say, it's like, okay, well, I don't see how then that transfers. You get what I'm saying?
oh, like you should. Okay, you just been in these spaces longer at this point, because I see what you're saying. I just haven't ran into the argument at a lower level first. So
I mean, I think it's as simple as like your brain, everything about you is coming from your parents. There's only one thing, though, about you that does not come from them. It is not like it can't be tested. It's not like it transfers. That's something, like there's no evidence of the transfer because of the fact that you start with a fresh, clean slate of a mind.
but okay, I don't know that that's true, because I think something does transfer that is in everybody, but it isn't specific to parents. Like, it's the moral compass. Like, everyone is born with this idea of shame, or I shouldn't lie, or honesty, or love. It's like children actually distinguish those things, and so it's like you're born with kind of your lottery ticket of, these are the genetics I got, like this is who I am, and I have this burden of consciousness that I have to fulfill. Like, you know what I mean?
Burden of consciousness, meaning life, or burden of your conscience,
Sorry,
meaning morality?
burden of conscience is in morality.
Okay.
Yeah.
But see, to me, those go hand in hand. Like, when we talk about the seen versus the unseen, morality is unseen.
Yes.
It's like, that's why I keep saying personality, character, personality, all those things are unseen.
Yeah.
Those things don't get passed down. I think personality comes out of nowhere. I think it's crazy. No, this is something. Personality versus character, or the moral weight, or the moral burden. It seems as if the moral burden, this is crazy. It seems like the moral burden is getting passed through.
Fair.
Or the moral burden is not getting passed through. The moral burden is passing through.
Yes,
but I think it's a direct connection from God. If God was here, and then God creates and breathes into Adam's nostrils and breathes into Adam, makes him a living being that he built, created from the dust of the earth.
Yes.
It's like he creates Adam from the dust of the ground, that's matter, but then he makes Adam a living being. Right. But because if God is good, and that is what he is in his nature, creating us with the ability to choose good or to not choose good, to not choose God, we should say.
Right.
It's like, well, we have that ability, but God in himself, as a self-sufficient being, is what he is in a self-sufficient way, immutable, unchanging. But putting us in flesh, in matter that is finite, it's like for God's morality, creating us in his image, it's like for that to be passing through. So everybody has this burden. But this burden wouldn't make sense if it was made of matter. It makes sense, though, because it is unseen. Morality is an unseen concept.
Right.
That is not a concept that can be tested. There is no way to look at.
Pull that out of my pocket.
Look at anger, or not even just anger. I feel like you can measure anger, but as far as the emotions are unseen.
Yeah.
Like, all those unseen things are either passing through, like the moral burden, But then personality seems like it pops up with a clean slate.
Yes.
Like nobody pops up thinking, this is who I am, and I just have this burden of who I am. Like you develop your personality depending on your location and your experiences. Morality isn't like that. As far as at its base, like the objective morality, like we talked about, not we were talking about respect and all those.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, I think it'd be something to define, but defining personality. Like this seems like something to work out, but it also feels like we're bleeding into the moral argument very easily.
Yeah, I mean, but without going in that direction, I think for me, I'm just focused on consciousness and what actually gets passed through, because all that to say, if that is a good argument, if it makes sense, it's just, I think it's a point in the favor of consciousness where it's like, that is not something that is limited to matter, because then we would see it being passed through matter. We should be able to trace it back in the same way we can trace every element of our body back, whether it's our muscles, our bones, the elements we have built into us. It's like we can trace all that back and keep finding it to the beginning,
right,
where it came from, everything. But we can't find mind. We can't find consciousness. We can't find emotion. We can't trace any of those things back. Character, morals, none of that is traceable, which makes no sense to me because it is unseen, but it exists.
Yeah, I'm following.
I think it's a good argument. Like I do want to. I already know I'm about to ask some people after this podcast to bring it up.
That's what I was about to say. I can't wait to edit this podcast because I'm going to learn something. Because I follow you, but I'm like, yeah, I haven't been in the ring with enough of the. It's like.
We haven't talked about this before too. It came on the fly of actually having the conversation.
Yeah, like to me right now, I'm like, you know what? It's like Mario Kart. Like you're driving on Rainbow Road, and I'm like, I just haven't played the stage enough. You just jumped off the edge,
right,
and landed on something else, and I'm like, and now you're in first place, and I'm like, you are in first. I think I'm just like, I would have to run this map a couple of times before I start jumping off edges.
I mean, I feel the same exact way though. I'm like, that's why I want to bring it up, because I'm like, that's making sense to me, and I want to see like if it for real makes sense. Like it just like anything else, it needs to be tested. I think this is just a good example of that. It's like you can think of a theory and be like, it's like, well, go poke as many holes in it as you can to see if it's airtight.
Yeah, I'm glad this happened, because up until this point, like it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know if people know who's who in this podcast.
What do you mean?
Like I think some people could have thought we were peers. Like, oh, like both of us are apologists, both of us make good analogies, both of us this and that, and it's like, well, now the jig is up.
I can't. I don't even feel like.
No, I mean it is. That's exactly my point. But.
No,
but I mean, seriously, it's not that I can't keep up. It's that like you've been in the ring at such a high level that it's just like, oh yeah, that's cool if both of us are in the ring sparring. Like we can learn this stuff, boxing, punch, jab, hook. Like we know the basics. But when you get in the ring with Muhammad Ali and then counter something, I'm like, oh, we are not on the same level. Like
I can't.
I mean, and obviously I knew this, but still, I'm like, it's one of those things, seriously, because I want to say it too for people who are like, this got really heady really fast, and it's like, you don't have to get crazy deep to be able to defend your faith, but you do have to appreciate the people who are willing to, because the battle's being fought up top. You know what I mean? Like the apologists that are defending the faith. I don't know. I think it's for me because the spaces are still relatively new, and I'm seeing the value, and I feel like I can articulate stuff well, but I didn't appreciate this stuff, and it felt like work. And it's the exact mindset that I've seen in so many kids with sports when they realize basketball isn't about shooting. Basketball isn't just about scoring. Basketball isn't about dunking. It's like when you realize it's a craft instead of a sport, like you actually say, oh, okay, do I want to do this or not? Like, and I think in general, Christianity has that too. It's not all brain, but it's like there's a craft to having intellectual conversations with people, loving conversations with people, reasonable conversations with people. I just did the whole logo. But but it's like choose your craft, but definitely appreciate the other ones too. And this is one of those times where I think your craft shone.
Yeah, it's just funny that, you know, it's like you never stop learning, or like the art of reasoning. You know, it's just one of those things where it's like you're trying to figure it out, and it's like all these different hypotheses can come to your mind, and it's like, I wonder if that could be the reason. It's like, well, no, that cancels this out. Well, I wonder if that could be the reason. Well, that would make sense. No, because of that. I wonder if that could be the reason. It's like that's all it is you trying to reason within yourself, like contemplating something, thinking, trying to make it make sense. And it's like, you might actually hit it on the mark or hit it on the head. You know, it's like you come up with a theory, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then go take it to people who can possibly debunk it.
Yeah.
And just to see what they will say. Like, this is a perfect example for me. I usually feel like I'm always teaching all the time, but this really just came up on the fly, you know? And that's, I think it's because that Delahanty argument always, I guess I could say, like, bothered me, because it's like trying to explain consciousness separate from matter. Like, it's like, I feel like I can still make a case, because, I mean, that's his argument against, like, something like what we're talking about, the cosmological argument, and just the existence of God, you know? And so for us to, even the argument about the universe having a beginning, it's like for us to say God was the cause of this effect.
Right.
He would say, why are you depositing that as if we've ever seen spirit or unseen apart from seen? That means it must be matter blended with spirit combined, if that's all we have examples of. It's almost working in his favor. My argument just is like, no, there is an independent aspect to it, because of the fact that matter, you know, it's like you would have to then argue that matter blended with like the kind of like the psychosomatic correlation. It's like it's the brain and the mind work together. If you damage something to the brain, it affects the mind. The mind can cause symptoms to the brain. If you stress is invisible, but that can cause physical symptoms. It's like there's like this relationship, and it's, I think that's their argument, where it's like it didn't have to cause the other. They seem to be connected, and that's the only examples that we have.
Yeah, I see. It's the idea of we have a habit of yin and yanging things instead of cause and affecting things, you know? And so it's like, oh, the brain and the mind, you put them together, and this is the relationship. And it's like, it's not true. It's more like the driver and the car. You can definitely damage the car in certain spots, and it will hurt the driver. And a bad driver will definitely damage a car eventually.
Right.
But it's like, but we wouldn't call these driver-car relation, like we wouldn't mesh them as yin and yang. It's like, no.
But you would have to explain that premise in a sense of, because we have examples of human beings. We know for a fact a human being has a mind that's a self-sufficient being walking around.
Right.
We see the car can't move without the human in it. That's already established from the beginning.
Right.
But if you didn't know which one was which,
yeah,
you'd
no,
have
I
to
mean, that's
figure out how to test that.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point, is it's like at every given point it feels like unless we get more information, we should assume the higher order operates on what we've understood about the lower order. You know what I mean? And so it's like, because we've seen things that are separate, because we see things that depend on each other, why would we make the assertion that the universe is that exception? You know what I mean?
But that's the thing, though, is if his argument is that matter and mind are somehow confused. And what example do we have where they're not? It would be no different going off of your analogy of saying, if you've only seen people in cars, you've never seen a human being walking by themselves. You've never seen a car sitting by itself. If there's not a single example of that, how would you know that the human was the source?
Well, I think you'd do the same thing that you would do to the, like, your airplane example or the phone example. It's like, well, you can experiment by, like, I think it's not, you couldn't say it's the human. What you'd have to say is something, like, causes the other. Something in this self-driving thing has to cause.
I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, that's like what I'm thinking is I'm like, you would have to make the same assumption of, okay, well, let's figure out how this thing works. And you would go in looking for a source. You would go inside of the thing, whatever we're talking about, looking for a source. And this would happen to be the human if you tested it enough. Like, you could pull the steering wheel and stuff, like the car might swerve or do something, but, it's like, I feel like you would still end up in a similar position.
So you think let's actually flesh that out. So if somebody was actually looking for this, using the car example, you think they would find mind? You think they'd come to that conclusion, or you think they'd come to the brain's wiring as far as what they would find? Or,
well, I think you'd have to assume.
Or the car's battery. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, like you'd have to assume reason. Because I think that's the thing is, the question is when does, like, I see the dilemma. Because it's like, when does the car stop working? You can do a couple of things to make sure that happens, including pulling a person out, but also taking the gas or the engine out or the tires off. Like,
right,
so
but if you can't separate them.
Okay. So going back to the universe analogy, God would be okay. So that's different. That's completely different, actually. I realize I'm arguing in a different place.
Okay.
So the issue you're saying is, how do you know consciousness is in a car? Not how do we know a car was designed? Like, because the argument about God is still, it's like, I know, like, alien or not, I know the car didn't make itself. Like, finding consciousness might be a completely different question, but I do know this car didn't exist before, at a certain point. I know the car didn't make itself. And so to get to the universe, it's like, it's not consciousness versus matter, it's existence versus non-existence. Like, if that makes sense.
What are you equating the car to say I know the car wasn't always here? What's that parallel for the universe?
Well, it would be more like your I forget the guy's name that made the blob analogy.
Oh yeah.
But that's what I would think is I would compare the car and the person to the blob, everything that exists. And then I would have to figure out how it got here. And it's like, because it's here, something had to make it, basically. And so with the universe, it becomes the same argument of like, all right, the universe is here, and we know that it began at a certain point. So how are we, like, I don't even know what the hypothesis is. Like, it's literally just, it just seems like one of those, like, I don't know, finding fingerprints on a gun. And then I say, I think you did it because the fingerprints are on you. And your DNA was there, and you knew the culprit, and you couldn't stand her. Like, and it's like, I have found multiple reasons, and then you just say, but it could be someone else. It's like, at that point, I'm like, you're not wrong. It could be.
Right.
But what are we going to say? Like, and do you even have a reason? It's like, well, we haven't seen enough cases of people who.
Right.
It's like, no. we have seen you.
Right.
Like, and I definitely see. Yeah, and it's just like, so at some point, it's like you don't get to escape the trial based on the percentage chance that it could have been someone we don't have evidence of ever seeing having a motivation for. It's like, yeah, I guess it could be some girl in Australia. Who knows?
Right.
But you're here with all of the reason to think it points to you. And so, yeah, I just don't know what the other. It seems like an accumulation of bad cases. It could have been the neighbor. It could have been this. It could have been that. And it's like, if you actually sit down and say, all right, let's stop, like, throwing in
Right.
random arguments. It's like, all right, one at a time. This one. No, that makes no sense. The Australia girl. Who? Bye. And then it's like someone else. Bye. And it's like, if you take them seriously individually, nothing really stands.
Their argument is more so like, we're fine with saying we don't know. We don't have the answer. I think making just any claim, like, just pissing people off sometimes.
I mean, yeah.
And I'm like, I think it's fair to reasonably try to make sense of something, like, knowing that you don't know for a fact. Like, I think that